Oh no, why is this happening now? Jordan Kingsley shouted into his phone, his voice bouncing off the polished marble walls off the 39th floor of Kingsley Global. The billionaire CEO marched across his glass-walled office, his eyes fixed on the circular driveway below, where three sleek black sedans had just pulled up. Out stepped a high-profile delegation from South Korea, businesslike and punctual, ready for a historic meeting. But disaster had struck. The interpreter had just canceled a sudden family crisis, impossible to postpone. In less than 15 minutes, the top executives of Korea's biggest tech empire would be seated in the boardroom to finalize a $180 million partnership, and every dollar of it rested on flawless communication. Mr. Kingsley, I've contacted every language service in the city, said Olivia, his right-hand assistant, still clutching her phone. No one is available. Not for something this sensitive, not with zero notice. Jordan pulled at his tie, custom-made in Milan. As sweat began to collect at his temples, he'd spent 2 decades building Kingsley Global from a garage operation into an international powerhouse. And now, all of it could fall apart because of a language gap. The South Korean firm was famous for its rigid business protocols. They wouldn't tolerate phone apps or awkward hand gestures. Then, a voice spoke from the far corner of the office, soft, clear, and steady. Excuse me, Mr. Kingsley, I speak fluent Korean. For a moment, no one moved. No one breathed. Have you ever experienced something like this? Let us know in the comments, and tell us where you're watching from. Your story matters, too. All eyes turned to Eliza Monroe, 27, who had paused while wiping the glass table. Dressed in the navy uniform of the janitorial staff, Eliza stood quietly, a microfiber cloth still in her hands. She had worked on the executive floors for nearly 3 years, always silent, always precise, almost invisible. The silence in the room was so thick you could hear the hum of the overhead lights. Olivia gave a short, nervous laugh. Eliza, this really isn't the time for jokes. This is an international contract. Jordan stared at Eros if seeing her for the first time. You speak Korean? He asked, his voice laced with doubt and hope. Korean, Japanese, and a bit of Vietnamese, Eliza replied calmly, meeting his gaze without hesitation. I majored in East Asian language at Langston University before taking this job. She had never imagined that scrubbing boardrooms would prepare her for something like this. But for 3 years, she'd been watching, listening, learning, especially from Olivia. And Olivia's expression was quickly shifting from mockery to disbelief. Jordan, you're not actually considering this, are you? A janitor, leading the most crucial meeting of the year. The thought alone would make headlines. But Jordan was out of options. There was something in Eliza's stance, calm, poised, and in the steady tone of her voice that made him pause. Prove it, he said suddenly. Say something in Korean. Eliza drew in a breath and spoke fluently, her words rolling effortlessly in polished Korean. Yurinun gachi ilamayo, sango win-win hyoblyo jiul jio habnada. Jordan didn't know what she said, not a word, but he felt it. The ease, the rhythm, the confidence that couldn't be faked. What does it mean? He asked, still processing. It's a respectful business welcome, she explained. A common phrase used in formal Korean meetings. It means, we are honored to meet with you and hope for a successful partnership. Olivia folded her arms, her expression tightening. Jordan, think about what this will look like that you're putting a janitor in front of a billion-dollar delegation. Then, a flash of memory pierced through Eliza's mind like a strike of lightning. 6 months earlier, she had walked into the executive restroom and found Olivia in tears, whispering on the phone. She's always there, that black girl, Olivia had said, her voice laced with disdain, hovering around meetings she has no business near. Eliza had acted like she hadn't heard, but she had, every word. Now, standing in that same office, Jordan looked at Eliza again. This time, not as background. There was depth in her gaze, sharp intelligence, quiet pride. For 3 years, she had swept these floors, wiped down glass walls, but absorbed every strategy, every move, every unspoken rule of the game. I'll give you 20 minutes, Jordan finally said, his voice steady. Get ready, or something appropriate. Meet me in the boardroom. Eliza nodded once and walked briskly out. Olivia leaned in, her voice sharp and cold. You've completely lost it. If this fails, your reputation goes down with her. But Jordan didn't respond. For the first time in years, he was about to learn that the most overlooked people can be the ones who carry the most value. What no one realized was that Eliza had been preparing for this longer than anyone in that building. And Olivia, with her polished words and buried bias, was about to discover that judging someone by the color of their uniform can be the most fatal error in business. If this story of resilience moves you, and you want to see how one woman changes everything, make sure to subscribe, because what happens next will surprise you. Exactly 20 minutes later, when Eliza stepped into the boardroom, the silence was instant and heavy. She had traded her janitor's uniform for a sleek black outfit, borrowed last minute from the front desk manager. IT was simple, but professional. Her hair was neatly pulled back into a low, elegant bun, and she held a leather notepad just like the other executives. "Holy hell," murmured Thomas Grant, the CFO, not bothering to hide his shock. "Is that seriously the same woman?" Olivia leaned toward the assistant, making no effort to keep her voice down. "You can dress up a street lamp, but it's still a street lamp," she said, smirking. The South Korean delegation arrived precisely on schedule. 5 immaculately dressed executives stood near the panoramic windows, chatting in Korean, admiring the skyline of San Francisco below. Jordan greeted them with confident charm, carefully introducing each person at the table. When he reached Eliza, he didn't mention her background or her title. "This is Eliza Monroe, our international liaison for Asia-Pacific markets," he said, each word measured. The head of the delegation, Mr. Kwon, bowed slightly as he greeted her. When Eliza responded in flawless Korean, thanking them for their time and complimenting their punctuality, a highly esteemed value in Korean culture, Mr. Kwon's expression lit up with both delight and surprise. For the first quarter of the meeting, Eliza worked like a symphony conductor, translating not just the language, but the tone, the subtle humor, the diplomatic cues. She bridged two cultures with precision, grace, and depth. Even the smallest jokes landed perfectly, making the Korean executives laugh warmly. It was seamless, until Olivia chose her moment. "Eliza," she said sweetly, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, "perhaps now is a good time to tell our guests about your unique journey through the company." Jordan shot her a warning glance, but she kept going. "It's just so heartwarming to see someone climb the ladder from, well, very humble beginnings." Her tone oozed false praise, dressed as encouragement, but every word cut deep. Eliza felt the familiar sting, that old, gnawing humiliation she'd carried since age 18, when she had dropped out of Langston University halfway through her junior year to care for her diabetic mother after she lost her job. Still, Eliza kept her voice even. "Life doesn't always follow a script," she said, meeting Mr. Kwan's eyes. "Sometimes opportunity knocks in unexpected places." She paused, then added deliberately, "Who would have thought that someone cleaning these very floors 3 years ago would now be seated here as your cultural liaison?" The words hung in the air. It speaks volumes about how deeply this company believes in recognizing potential wherever it exists. The silence that followed was heavy, stiff, palpable. Mr. Kwan's face didn't show disapproval, but his expression shifted. There was a flicker of discomfort, a quiet withdrawal. Eliza's stomach tightened. In Korean business culture, professional ranks and appearances meant everything. Jordan jumped in, hoping to repair the moment. "What Olivia meant," he said quickly, "is that here, we value talent, no matter where it comes from." But it was too late. Eliza could feel the shift. The room had changed. The warmth was replaced by cool politeness. They still engaged, still nodded, but the natural flow was gone. She had become a spectacle, not a professional, not anymore. And in that moment, something inside Eliza locked into place, solid, unshakable. For 3 years, she had wiped down these tables while others sealed deals, crafted strategies, and shifted the course of millions. And while they spoke, she listened to every tactic, every misstep, every political maneuver, especially Olivia's. She remembered when Olivia inflated Q2 numbers just to dazzle a hesitant investor, or the time she stole credit for an innovative project built entirely by a junior analyst who was quietly let go weeks later due to budget constraints. Then there was the worst, when Olivia used confidential documents from internal Pachesto to negotiate better terms for her personal side investment. Eliza hadn't missed a word, not a single one. and more importantly, she remembered everything. The meeting ended with a handshake and a vague promise to review the proposal carefully. In diplomatic language, that meant, "We'll think about it if nothing better comes along." As the delegation exited, Olivia allowed herself a smug smile. "Well, that was something," she said, gathering her papers with theatrical flair. "Maybe next time, we should be more upfront about who's actually running the show." Jordan's jaw tightened. He was visibly fuming. But before he could reply, Eliza rose from her seat. She stood tall, calm but in control. "Olivia," she said, her voice soft, but with a weight that silenced the room. "Mr. Kwan mentioned something interesting before he left." Olivia raised an eyebrow. "Oh, and what was that?" "He said he appreciated my fluency, but he was puzzled by the internal hierarchy of the meeting." Eliza let the pause breathe. She wanted the silence to do its part. "He asked if I could contact him to clarify a few cultural inconsistencies in our structure." Olivia's smile faltered, just slightly. In particular, he found it strange that the person speaking his language wasn't positioned as the lead negotiator. In his culture, language isn't just a tool. It implies authority. Eliza smiled faintly. "Professional, deadly. He wants to understand how our leadership works before making any final decisions." And just like that, the air shifted. Olivia's face lost color, just enough to show she understood what this meant. For 3 years, Eliza had been ignored, dismissed, unseen. But in that invisibility, she had found something priceless: perspective, power, leverage. Every slight, every insult, every belittling comment had shaped a strategist who knew this company's weak points better than anyone. And she wasn't done. 2 hours later, Eliza was back in her navy blue uniform, pushing her janitorial cart down the executive hallway. But this time, every step was part of the plan. For years, she had memorized every hallway, every whisper, every confidential file carelessly left on glass tables, especially Olivia's. "Look who's back where she really belongs," Olivia said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, as she laughed with Jennifer from accounting. "After today's little comedy act, at least now we all know our place," Olivia said loudly, her voice dripping with smugness. Eliza kept cleaning, her hands moved out of habit, but her mind was recording every single word. What Olivia didn't know was that for the past 3 years, Eliza had cleaned that very office. And in doing so, she had seen more than anyone realized. She had noticed personal emails left wide open, overheard whispered calls about skewing internal reports, and most importantly, she had discovered the contents of that locked drawer Olivia thought no one ever touched. Inside, documents detailing unfair competition tactics used to crush smaller firms, especially black-owned ones. "You know what really gets me?" Olivia said, clearly performing for Jennifer from accounting. "Jordan actually thought a janitor could save a $180 million deal. Like mopping floors qualifies you to talk strategy with real executives." At that exact moment, Eliza's phone buzzed quietly in her pocket. A text from an unknown number, but the characters were unmistakable, Korean. She opened the message. It was from Mr. Kwan. Ms. Monroe, "I'd like to speak with you privately regarding our company and potential opportunities. Could we meet tomorrow at 10:00 at Tihan River Cafe on 5th Avenue? I believe I have a proposal that may interest you." Eliza's heart skipped. This wasn't about translation anymore. It was something bigger. She had seen it in Mr. Kwan's eyes during the meeting. He was watching her not just as a bridge between languages, but as a professional who held her ground with clarity and grace. That night, in her tiny apartment in Queens, Eliza opened a folder she had been building in silence for over 2 years. It wasn't paranoia. It was survival. Preparation. The file was titled, Kingsley Global, Ethics Violations. Inside were 67-page soft, carefully gathered evidence. Printed emails Olivia assumed were erased, weekend call logs captured by internal surveillance, and more damning than all, photographs of documents showing Olivia had intentionally sabotaged multiple contracts with minority-led companies in the last 18 months. Eliza had witnessed her lie to clients, steal credit for ideas, and block promotions for people she deemed not image-friendly. At exactly 10 o'clock the next morning, Eliza walked into Han River Cafe. She wore a modest but polished outfit, the same one she had bought years ago with money saved for college. Mr. Quan was already there. Seated beside him was a poised woman who stood and extended her hand. "I'm Yuna Park," she said warmly, Vice President of Global Expansion. Mr. Quan greeted Eliza in English but quickly transitioned to Korean. "Yesterday, I saw more than language mastery," he said. "I saw someone who stood tall under pressure meant to crush her." Yuna leaned forward, smiling. "We're growing fast in North America, and we need someone who can navigate both cultures, who sees what others miss." Eliza didn't speak for a moment. She simply smiled. This time, she wasn't invisible. This time, they saw her. "Someone who's watched from the inside," Mr. Quan added, his voice calm but firm. "And someone who refuses to bow to small minds in oversized titles." Eliza held her composure as the conversation deepened. For over 2 hours, she spoke with precision about international market trends, negotiation nuances across cultures, and how American firms often misunderstood the sharp intelligence of Asian investors. She even hinted, carefully, at certain patterns of misconduct witnessed in rival companies, no names, but enough to spark curiosity. Toward the end, Eunice slid a sleek card across the table. Eliza picked it up slowly. It read, "Monroe and Associates. Global Advisory." Just below the title was a proposed salary 0.5 times her current income at Kingsley Global. "Think it over," Mr. Quan said, rising. "But we do have a request." Yuna continued, "We'd like you to assist in reviewing discrepancies of uncovered in Kingsley's current contracts. There may be violations of international trade regulations that, if confirmed, they could lead to federal inquiries." Eliza gripped the card carefully, her hands steady. For 3 years, she had been treated like background noise. Now, 2 of the sharpest business leaders in Asia were offering her a seat at the strategic table. Yuna leaned in. "There's an emergency board meeting at Kingsley tomorrow morning. Our sources say the Korean delegation has submitted a formal complaint regarding irregularities. It might be worth showing up." That evening, in her quiet apartment in Queens, Eliza called her mother. "Mom, remember when you used to say that patience is a smart woman's sharpest weapon?" "Of course I do," her mother replied gently. "Why?" Eliza smiled. "I think I finally get what you meant." She hung up, then turned toward the city lights flickering outside her window. Tomorrow, Olivia and the entire Kingsley board would learn a brutal truth. 3 years of silence had created a bitter employee. They had forged a strategist. One who knew every crack in their walls, every secret stashed in drawers, every word spoken when they thought no one was listening. And unlike the executives who judged power by titles and clothing, Eliza had learned that real strength is in timing, watching, striking only, when no one sees it coming. The next morning, the executive boardroom at Kingsley Global buzzed with unease. Jordan had called an emergency meeting after receiving a formal report from the Korean delegation citing serious contract violations, serious and auto-triggered government investigations. Olivia entered with confidence, her red blazer radiant, her heels clicking like punctuation. She had spent all night preparing her defense. She knew exactly who to blame. "Well," she began, addressing the 7 board members, "I assume we're here to unpack yesterday's disaster. As I warned, placing an unqualified janitor into a high-level negotiation was reckless. And now, we're paying the price, $180 million worth." That's when the door opened, quietly, but with unmistakable weight. Eliza stepped in, dressed in a flawless slate gray suit. Not borrowed. Purchased the night before with the advance she'd received from her new partners in Seoul. She carried a sleek leather briefcase and a lightweight laptop, her steps measured with the confidence of someone who finally belonged. "Apologies for the delay," she said, taking the empty seat beside Jordan. "I was finalizing a few details for today's discussion." Olivia's jaw clenched. "With all due respect, Jordan," she said, voice sharp, "I fail to understand why she's here. This is a closed executive session." "She's here," Jordan replied evenly, "because the Korean delegation formally requested her presence to clarify the allegations they submitted yesterday." Eliza placed her laptop on the table and opened it smoothly, her movements deliberate. "Mr. Kwan approached me yesterday afternoon," she said, "with concerns regarding irregularities in Kingsley Global's contract procedures. It appears there is evidence of bid manipulation and intentional sabotage against competing vendors." Olivia's composure cracked. That's absurd, she snapped. What kind of evidence could a janitor possibly have about internal executive operations? Eliza turned slightly toward her. The smile on her lips was calm, but final. The kind of evidence you gather when people talk in front of you for 3 years is if you're not even there. For a moment, the room froze. Then Eliza connected her laptop to the projector. The screen lit up. The first image, an internal email from Olivia dated 7 months earlier, sent to a third-party vendor. This email, Eliza explained, was sent to Horizon Systems and contains confidential pricing details from a competing firm, Vitech Solutions, who were bidding on the same project. Dead silence followed. Olivia shifted, tried to speak, but Eliza kept going. This next document, she said, shows how project budgets led by minority staff were deliberately inflated, causing project cancellations that were later attributed to so-called underperformance. The screen showed spreadsheets with manual edits clearly highlighted. Alongside them, email chains and timestamps from internal security logs point 3 years, all documented, without error. This is a trap, Olivia shouted, rising to her feet. She's manipulating this to get revenge because I exposed who she really is. Eliza remained seated, unmoved. Mr. Kingsley, she said, the next clip was recorded by your building's own surveillance system 8 months ago. She hit play. Olivia's voice filled the room. We can't have those kinds of people thinking they belong in executive boardrooms. It's about maintaining professional standards. Olivia's face drained of color. She remembered that conversation, a private exchange with Thomas, where they had discussed how to filter applicants for high-visibility roles. Eliza clicked again. This next clip, she continued, was from just 2 weeks ago. Captures Olivia instructing reception to lose resumes from candidates whose names sounded too ethnic. The room went cold. Mr. Raymond Johnson, a senior director who had served Kingsley Global for over 15 years, leaned forward. A black man, with a steady gaze. Olivia, he said, his voice grave. Is any of this true? That's out of context, Olivia stammered. Her breath quickened. Beads of sweat began to glisten at her hairline. You don't understand, she said weakly. I've been under immense pressure to uphold company standards. Eliza looked at her, calm, precise. Company standards, she replied gently, include ethics, integrity, compliance with anti-discrimination laws, all of which have been violated systematically for the past 18 months. Jordan turned to Olivia, his jaw clenched. You have 30 seconds to explain why you shouldn't be fired immediately and reported to the federal authorities. Olivia looked around the boardroom, desperately seeking support. A single friendly glance, an ally. She found only cold stares, disapproval, disgust. You're making a mistake, she whispered, her voice cracking. She's just a bitter janitor with a grudge, and she. Jordan interrupted, his voice commanding the room. Is our new director of international relations. And you're fired. Silence. Complete and overwhelming. Olivia stood frozen, her balance faltering. 15 years of career, gone in less than 5 minutes. Your credentials will be revoked, Jordan continued. Security will escort you to collect your belongings. He paused. And Olivia, considering the severity of what we've seen, all evidence will be turned over to the Department of Justice. As security approached, Olivia cast one last glance at Eliza. Sharp, bitter, and venomous. You may have won today, she hissed, but that doesn't change what you really are. Eliza met her gaze, unflinching. You're right, she replied softly. I am exactly what I've always been, someone who watches, learns, and waits for the right moment to act. The difference is, now I'm finally exactly where I belong. 3 hours later, after the meeting officially ended with Eliza confirmed in her new role, Jordan called her aside. How did you manage all this? He asked. 3 years' worth of evidence, recordings, documents? Eliza allowed herself a quiet, satisfied smile. When people treat you like furniture, she said, they forget furniture has eyes and ears. Olivia underestimated invisibility, and she overestimated the power of her own ego. She turned toward the window, gazing out at the skyline. That moment, she understood. The greatest victory wasn't destroying Olivia. It was building something Olivia could never even comprehend, a future on her own terms, with her name etched in every decision. And this time, No one could erase her. 6 months later, Eliza Monroe sat in her corner office on the 38th floor of Kingsley Global. The desk before her was covered in documents, negotiation drafts in Korean, Japanese, and English, contracts that had already brought in over $400 million in new partnerships from the Asia-Pacific region. Eliza, a voice called from the door to IT was Jennifer, now her personal assistant. The South Korean delegation has arrived. They're excited to meet the woman who tripled our revenue in just 6 months. Through the tall windows of her office, Eliza Monroe gazed out over the skyline she once admired only as a silent janitor, invisible, overlooked. Now, as Director of International Relations, she was one of the most respected executives in all of Midtown Manhattan. Her annual salary, $300,000, had ensured that her mother received the best diabetes care available, and Eliza had finally completed her master's degree through Columbia's executive program, paid in full on her own terms. What about the Forbes roundtable next week? Jennifer asked, scrolling through a tightly packed calendar. Confirmed, Eliza replied, adjusting the navy blue blazer she now wore not out of necessity, but by choice. They want to feature me as one of the country's top 30 most influential female leaders under 35. Across the city, in a one-bedroom rental in Queens, Olivia Harper sat alone. A stack of unpaid medical bills and therapy invoices cluttered her kitchen table. Dozens of job rejection letters spilled from a folder nearby. After the federal inquiry, she had been fined $50,000 personally and banned from holding any executive role within federally contracted companies for 5 years. Her name had become synonymous with toxic leadership, a case study in every business journal. Unemployable, that morning, she had seen Eliza's face on the cover of Business Weekly. The headline read, "The Interpreter Who Reshaped Global Business." It hit her like a slap at NO, like a fall from a place she thought she'd never leave. Back at Kingsley Global, Jordan stood in the executive conference room with the entire board gathered around. "I'd like to formally acknowledge what Eliza Monroe has done for this company," he announced. "She didn't just salvage a crumbling deal. She opened up entire regions we never thought we could reach." Mr. Raymond Johnson, the same board member who had once challenged Olivia, stood slowly. He cleared his throat as the room fell silent. "In my 40 years in this industry," he began, "I've rarely seen a transformation this impactful. Eliza has reminded us all that true leadership has no color, no social rank, and no tolerance for arrogance or prejudice." Applause followed. Loud, sincere, sustained. Eliza remained seated, her expression modest, her thoughts drifting to the days when she had polished the table in that very boardroom. That night, in her newly renovated apartment in the Upper East Side, her phone rang. It was her mother. "Sweetheart, I watched your interview on TV tonight. You spoke so beautifully about second chances." Eliza smiled. "I learned from the best, Mom. You always told me. They can try to take our titles, our status, but not what we know, not what we're capable of." In that interview, Eliza had been asked about Olivia. Did she feel resentment for the way she had been treated? Her answer was simple and graceful. "Olivia gave me the greatest gift a person like her could ever give someone like me. She showed me exactly who I never wanted to become," Eliza had said during the interview. Her arrogance taught me that real power comes from lifting others, not standing on their necks. 3 weeks later, Eliza stood on stage at Langston University, her alma mater. She was announcing the launch of a new scholarship program she had personally funded, designed for students who had been forced to pause their education due to financial hardship. "No one," she told an auditorium packed with 500 students, "should have to choose between caring for family and chasing their dreams." The Second Light Initiative had already approved 20 full scholarships for the upcoming semester, funded in part by her own salary. Across the city, in a dim apartment in Queens, Olivia sat watching the live stream. She closed her laptop slowly. Tears welled in her eyes. But this time, they weren't from anger or self-pity. For the first time in months, they felt like real remorse. Back at Kingsley Global, Eliza walked the same corridors where she had once pushed a janitorial cart. Now, young professionals greeted her with respect, assistants sought her guidance, and 5 rising employees from operations now considered her a mentor. "You know what I find remarkable?" Jordan said to her one afternoon as they stood by the window off the executive lounge. You could have used everything you knew about Olivia to ruin her life. But instead, you focused on lying what mattered. Eliza gave a quiet smile. The best revenge, she said, isn't tearing someone down. It's building something so extraordinary that their attempt to break you becomes irrelevant. Eliza Monroe's story became more than an HR miracle. It became a corporate legend. Proof that grace, preparation, and invisible strength can outlast any injustice. She turned 3 years of silence into her most powerful weapon. She reminded the world that real leadership doesn't come from titles or corner offices. It comes from recognizing potential where others see only limits. Olivia tried to humiliate her, dismiss her, erase her, but in the end, she became the very architect of her own downfall, because Eliza, like so many unseen talents, wasn't just waiting. She was preparing to lead. If this story moved you, and you believe in the power of second chances, don't forget to subscribe for more stories that prove one truth. Dignity and talent always rise, and no matter how deep you try to bury them.